As more and more begin to know, the status quo has got to go. They're bound to say yes to a man named Dr. No, a man who makes the establishment panic. Grassroots are growing way too wild, too organic.
So President Biden reassured Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that he was not trying to undermine him politically by criticizing the Israeli government. And this was reported by Axios on Tuesday, and Biden gave Netanyahu this assurance during a phone call on Monday, which came after Chuck Schumer gave his little speech about Israel and called Netanyahu an obstacle for peace and said that there should be elections in Israel. Biden was asked about what Schumer said, and he said that he thought he gave a good speech. So sources told Axios that Netanyahu complained about Schumer's speech and Biden's approval of it, prompting Biden to say that he was not looking to undermine the Israeli leader or intervene in Israel's domestic politics. Biden and other Democrats in the U.S. have tried to distance themselves from the Netanyahu government while also supporting Israel's mass slaughter of Palestinians and the starvation siege on Gaza. This criticism has not amounted to a policy change as the U.S. continues to provide Israel with unconditional military aid, as I am always pointing out. So this was the same call where Biden and Netanyahu agreed that Israel will send a delegation to Washington to discuss Israel's plans to invade Rafah, the Gaza city on the Egyptian border, where there are 1.5 million Palestinians. U.S. officials have been cautioning against a full-scale invasion and are suggesting a more limited operation. According to the White House, Biden expressed to Netanyahu, quote, deep concerns about the prospect of Israel conducting a major ground operation in Rafah, where more than 1 million displaced civilians are currently seeking shelter after fleeing fighting in the north, end quote. But Netanyahu said on Tuesday that he brushed aside Biden's concerns and reaffirmed that he's planning to attack the city. So this is the day after he spoke with Biden. He told members of the Knesset's Foreign Affairs Committee, quote, I made it as clear as possible to the president that we are determined to complete the elimination of these battalions in Rafah, and there is no way to do this without a ground incursion, end quote. Netanyahu said that Israel was under international pressure, but said that Israel was rejecting that pressure in order to achieve the goals that Netanyahu has set out. And we always have to keep in mind that the U.S. doesn't believe Israel can achieve those goals, namely eradicating Hamas. That's something Netanyahu always says he's going to do. U.S. intelligence doesn't think that they can do that. And Israeli intelligence, there's been signs that they don't think they could do it either. They can't destroy all of the tunnels under Gaza, and just, the way that they're fighting the war, killing all these civilians is a total recruitment tool for Hamas. So here we have, Netanyahu and Biden, trying to, put their issues aside and get along so they could continue committing these atrocities together in Gaza. So the governor of Russia's Belgorod Oblast announced Tuesday that authorities will evacuate about 9,000 children from the area as Ukraine has been stepping up attacks on Russia's border regions. So this is the governor of Belgorod. He said, quote, a large number of villagers are being evacuated today. We are currently planning to evacuate about 9,000 children, end quote. And he said that over the past week, 16 people were killed and 98 were wounded by Ukrainian shelling in Belgorod. And I believe they're referring to artillery shelling, as well as there's been a lot of drone attacks. And he said that over 130 residential houses and 60 passenger cars were damaged as a result of Ukrainian shelling just over the past day. And he said this on Tuesday. And there was a zoo in Belgorod that said it was hit by Ukrainian shelling, and there was no people killed, but a kangaroo was killed in that attack. So Ukraine has increased its attacks on Russian territory as Russia has been gaining more ground on the battlefield. Russian forces have been making steady gains since taking the Donetsk city of Avdiivka last month. And on Tuesday, Russia said that its forces took the village of Orlivka, which is about 2.5 miles west of Avdiivka. So the Pentagon is looking to stay in Niger despite an order from the country's government for U.S. forces to leave. Pentagon spokeswoman Sabrina Singh told reporters on Monday that the U.S. was seeking clarification from Niger and is in talks with officials in the military-led government known as the National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland. So this isn't really a surprise that the U.S. is saying, hang on a minute, we're not pulling out right away. Let's try to work something out here. So we'll see if this gets to the point where Niger is saying, no, you have to go. And then, if things might get a little hairy there. But it looks like, again, because they have that big drone base, that's what this is all about. Air Base 201, which cost over $100 million to build. They don't want to give them up. They don't want to give that up, although they are in talks with other West African countries to base drones on their territory. But hopefully this ends with the U.S. Packing up and leaving peacefully. But we'll see how it all plays out.
Here's Gerald Salenti with today's trends in the news.
As Ukraine loses the war, they're going to increase their attacks inside of Russia, hit a nuclear power plant. We wrote this in your Trends Journal, oil refineries, anything they can to keep getting more support from the United States and NATO. And now that's happening. And now TASS reported today, the Russian news agency, their foreign minister, whoever intelligence guy, that little Carlson Macron, the guy with a pecker thinner than his fucking pen that he'd probably like up his ass with his fake little fucking hair, sending troops, French troops to go fight in Ukraine. That's what's being reported. That means Ukraine is at war with Russia. World War III is escalating. We read what the Polish are doing. More troops, more money, more building up the military, one country after another. It's all in your magazine. So going back to the markets. Oh, the markets went up today because they're worrying about what the Fed is going to do. The Fed may hold rates tomorrow when they announce it. I would have thought they would have taken them down by now. Inflation's not going away. You're going to see oil prices are now up more than $20 than they were a month ago. Excuse me, not $20. Yeah, $20. That's right, $20 a barrel. $20 a barrel more than they were a month ago. So when you're filling up your tank, thank Congress and all the moronic little freaks going back to the markets. All things are connected. And that's what we do differently in Trends Research and the Trends Journal. Opportunity misses those who view the world through the eyes of their profession. So the markets went up today based on where they think interest rates are finally going to go. They need more cheap dough. You have a global recession. We are going into dragflation, higher inflation, and declining economic growth. But when all else fails, they take it to war. Whole trends in global economic front. When the economy falls, jobs go with it. This is our 77th week. You should see the job layoffs that are going on. This is going to have an effect on the economy because people start losing their jobs, not going to be able to pay for their rent, pay for their housing, pay their debt. Things are going to get a lot worse until they start lowering interest rates dramatically. And they're going to do it. And when interest rates go down, the dollar's going to go down and gold prices are going to go up. Private equity firms unable to sell 28,000 companies. And by the way, the private equity company groups own Wall Street. And when I was a young guy, this stuff didn't exist. Only started to happen in the mid-'80s. And now they own everything. Cities cut spending as commercial real estate tax revenues slump. Wow, what a surprise. How about office building bust that we warned about over 3 years ago? 3 years ago. And now the banking bust is happening. And there are the articles in here in your economic update and a whole review of this week's important economic news. The banks are going bust. It's being hidden in the news. And now Wall Street on Parade, which is a great site to go to by Pam and Russ Martin, they're reporting things that nobody else is in the banking sector. They're showing how they lied and shoved a lot more money into the system to artificially prop up the banks when the Silicon Conman Bank failed last March, and the other banks followed, First Republic, and how much more money they're really pumping in to keep these things up. These banks are in dire straits. By the way, your office occupancy rate, meaning how many people going to work, of the 10 largest cities in America, it came down from 52.5%. Now it's 50.7%. That's right. That's all it is. So now all the businesses that depended on commuters are going out of business. And our research is showing that things are going down in the hospitality and service sectors. It's going to hit. The people are hurting. The crash is coming. But don't worry. When all else fails, they take you to war. Your other sections that you're not going to want to miss in this Trends Journal. Again, trends in geopolitics. Again, as we warned, as Ukraine loses war, it escalates attacks inside Russia. This is just the beginning. And again, if oil prices, as Israel keeps expanding its war, bombs away deeper into Lebanon, which we're writing about, deeper into Syria, more attacks against Iran. If Iran gets involved militarily against Israel, you're going to see oil prices hit above $130 a barrel, and that's going to crash the equity markets and the global economy, and no one in the mainstream media is talking about that. No one. No peace allowed. EU's top diplomat rejects Pope's call for peace in Ukraine. Diplomat, yeah, a bunch of little shits. Trends eye views. Schools across the U.S. begin confiscating cell phones. Again, we're writing about this to show the decline of society and how dumb people are getting. As I said, they misspelt it in the King James Bible when they said the meek shall inherit the earth. The geeks have inherited the earth.
The corporate media lied too much, and it killed them. I had that experience. I was just saying off air at one of your speeches probably 20 years ago. I'd never seen you speak before, and you went off about the Federal Reserve. And I remember thinking, what an esoteric subject. I knew nothing about it. I thought only crazy people cared. But again, I was completely ignorant about monetary policy at the time. And I was shocked by how much the crowd loved it. They were completely tuned in. They thought it was really important. Why would the average person 20 years ago have a better sense of that than, say, me, who was paid to follow the subject but wasn't? How did people know?
I got it from literature. You could read about it. We didn't
Yes.
have an internet. We didn't have the radio or TV giving us good information, but it was out there. For one group that helped me a whole lot was Leonard Reed, the Foundation for Economic Education.
Yes.
I knew him, and he was a true believer. He was a dignified person and very likable. And he talked about process, how you reach people. And but he was very, very libertarian in his own way. But he was sort of an intellectual. And he influenced me a lot. So I read everything he did. And he did a lot of literature. But the follow-up of that was, of course, the Mises Institute. And,
Yes.
and I was part of that. And I think, I think they're important people. I know people on TV are really important.
Oh, so important.
So important. But there are a lot of people that are important. I think the ideas are the most important, and they come and go, but the ideas make all the difference in the world. I mean, I look at the need for the ideas on how our country came about. You know, Thomas Jefferson and others that knew exactly what they were talking about. But we don't have many Thomas Jeffersons around anymore. So, but there's more people. There are influence there, but there are more. But the underground, the silent majority, the remnant. I believe in the remnant both in a philosophic and a religious sense. When things deteriorate, there's always somebody there that's going to gather together, 10, 12, 15, 200, or 500. They gather together and they talk about the real things that are important. And the remnant, I think, is much bigger than anybody ever realized. And I think when I walked into those stadiums, I don't know how many times I would say, where did these people come from? I was totally amazed.
I thought the same thing.
Because, I remember my goal was never to be in politics. I had no desire to be in politics, but I wanted to use politics to spread a message of personal liberty.
Yes.
And that was my goal. So that was the whole reason that I got involved. And evidently there were other people looking for the same thing. And I was impressed with how many people there were. And I got to the point where I thought young people basically were being ridiculed and made fun of, and they still get it, and some of them deserve it. But they're still young people, are very good and intellectual, and they, when I even back, it's been a while since I was a candidate. When I would mention the remnant, they knew exactly what I was talking about. Yes. People who gather together for ideological reasons, and it's it's nobody looking for to be a good lobbyist and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And Washington is so bad that somebody said, "What? How did you ever survive it?" I said, "Well, I said that I never became an optimist. I never said I'm going to cure the world. I thought the ideas were important, and that's what I wanted to do because I was very selfish. Because I thought it made me feel better talking about something I believed in.
Yes.
And then when I saw some kids at Berkeley and other schools getting up and saying, and the Fed, well, liberty is not dead at all. I think it just gets reignited, and I think we're in the early phases of that. But I also believe we have to go through rough, tumbled times because the price always has to be paid. The price in the sense, how do you liquidate the debt? We can't walk away from that debt.
But how do we liquidate the debt?
The market will liquidate it, and the way the market liquidates it is. What they'll demand is like the person that wants $50 hourly wages.
Yes.
You print money, and every time you print money, the value of the dollar goes down. So the value of the debt goes down. You just a theoretical thing. If you double the money supply and prices go up 50%, it doesn't work that way. But if you do that, the real debt goes down. So it's a theft, it's a tax, it's evil.
So you inflate your way out of it.
Yeah, and that's what will happen, because what won't happen is the people are going to get together and all of a sudden say, Ron, you need to go back. And yeah, sure. We need to go back and get more people. We do have some very good people in Congress, but they're pretty lonely too.
Yes.
And they're very lonely. But I think I tell people, you're not going to get 12, 24, or 100 new members of Congress. The system is so embedded with bankruptcy and corruption that that's not going to work. But I'm still an optimist, because I think where it counts, where the people are studying and understanding, and they were ahead of us. I think they were ahead of me, because they said, and the Fed, it's fiat money, and so they're well along the way, and it's more available now than ever before. This information.
Yes.
So I always figure that if somebody will listen, I'll talk. But like I said, I in a way do this for sort of selfish reason, because I want to do it. I get some benefit, emotional and philosophic benefit by doing it, but never as much as I expected. I mean, I always got more than I ever expected, because there's more people out there wanting to change their mind. I still get hundreds and hundreds of letters. The neatest story I get are young people writing to me that they've started their own organization. And there's a freedom organization, and they're very creative. And at the end of my speeches, I used to talk about, if you're listening and you agree with this, I think you have a higher moral responsibility than somebody that just doesn't know what's going on.
Right.
And you have the responsibility to put it out there. And that I think is a lot of them took me at my word, and they have started their own organization. And I think you can't stop it. An idea whose time has come can't be stopped by armies. Right. And I strongly believe that. So.
An introduction to one of the most abused parts of the Constitution, that is, the necessary and proper clause. It's also one of the most complex, which is why we were warned it would be used and abused to expand federal power. Now, the Federalists during the time of ratification, they told us over and over and over that it wouldn't add any new power. It was what was considered a recital. Anti-Federalists warned that even if that was the truth, it was going to be expanded because it was ambiguous. And all along, even at the time of ratification, there were even 3 different views on the word or the meaning of the word necessary in this legal document from the 18th century. And if there was anything nefarious going on, I think it was with the necessary and proper clause. Let's kick it off with the text of the clause, which is Article 1, Section 8. The Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States, or in any department or officer thereof. Here from our website, this is again, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. A lot of people tell you that there's 17 powers delegated to the federal government of the Constitution. They're referencing Article 1, Section 8, the first 17 powers, pointing out that the 18th really isn't a delegation of power, but there are other powers delegated throughout the document, somewhere around 30 to 35. But anyways, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, necessary and proper, is often called the elastic clause or the sweeping clause because many people believe it gives the federal government power to do just about anything. They started calling it the sweeping clause during the ratification debates. However, necessary and proper doesn't actually delegate any power at all. And here from Rob Nadelson's great paper, The Agency Law Origins of the Necessary and Proper Clause, points out that this was drafted by lawyers, some of the top ones in the country at the time. The lawyers who drafted the Necessary and Proper Clause took its language directly out of contemporary agency law and usage. So agency law goes all the way back to the common law. It's about, you can think about it in commercial law. It's about principals and agents. So if you own a business and you hire an agent to run your business, there's certain ways to approach that, what they're authorized to do, hiring people in commercial contracts, etc. Rob goes on. He says the purpose of the clause was to reinforce the role of Congress as the agent of the people, exercising implied incidental powers necessary as a legal term of art for carrying into execution their written instructions, that is the Constitution, subject to prevailing fiduciary norms, which is the proper part of it. Moreover, during the ensuing struggle over whether to adopt the Constitution, this was the meaning, without most of the legal jargon, of course, that the Federalists sold to the ratifying public. And here's from James Wilson describing the clause during the ratification debates. Again, if we want to understand the legal meaning of anything in the Constitution, we don't necessarily want to just understand what they had to think about it in Philadelphia, because those proceedings were secret. They had no impact on the legal meaning of the document. Any legal document has the same meaning today as it was understood to mean the moment it was given legal force. And the people who gave it legal force were the people of the several states in the ratifying convention. So if you want to understand how they explained it, that's what they approved. When they said, we're going to reject the idea of this, or we're going to approve the idea of this, it's based on how it was explained to them. And here's James Wilson in the Pennsylvania ratifying convention. Can the words, the Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper to carry into execution the foregoing powers, be capable of giving them general legislative power? Of course, that's how it's treated today. They can do anything that they want, and whatever they consider necessary, whatever they consider proper, they can do whatever. In other words, unlimited power in all cases whatsoever, just like what they fought to get away from with the British in the Declaratory Act of 1766. But that was the argument against it. Wilson saying, no, the legal terms mean this. He said, I trust it is meant that they shall have the power of carrying into effect the laws which they shall make under the powers vested in them by this Constitution. He followed up a few days later, again, James Wilson. He said, it gives no more or other powers, nor does it in any degree go beyond the particular enumeration. For when it is said that Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper, those words are limited and defined by the following, quote, for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. It is saying no more than that the powers we have already particularly given shall be effectually carried into execution. James Madison in Federalist 44 said, without the substance of this power, the whole Constitution would be a dead letter. If they have the power, if they've been delegated the power to establish post offices, but they don't have the ability included in that to be able to hire people to run the post office or to merely lease or buy land in order to establish that post office or pay for the wood or chop down the trees to build the building, et cetera, et cetera. So Madison is saying without the substance of this, without including this, all the delegated powers mean absolutely nothing. It would be impossible. He says in Federalist 44, basically it would be impossible to list all the various ways to carry out a particular power. And that's what we understand in agency commercial law today. If you've authorized someone to run your business, they're authorized to do the necessary and proper things in order to run that business. If you authorize them to run your corner store, you don't have to specifically spell out in the contract that they're authorized to purchase a mop to wash the floor. But if they want to buy a tire store in order to bring more foot traffic, that's a whole different story. They've taken on a power that's greater. So Madison in Federalist 44 also described the power conferred under the necessary and proper clause as, quote, indispensably necessary. And he equates this to those that are requisite, which was defined, requisite was generally defined in dictionaries at the time as essential. George Nicholas in the Virginia Ratifying Convention repeated this kind of message. He said, the committee will perceive that the Constitution had enumerated all the powers which the general government should have, but did not say how they were to be exercised. It therefore, in this clause, tells us how they shall be exercised. Does it give any new power? I say not. So in other words, the Federalists are saying this is not additional power. This is just reaffirming what the document already tells us.
Obviously, there are some differences, but nothing ever really changes.
Yeah.
You know, when it comes to big things, the establishment, the deep state, or whoever they are, the programs continue, no matter what they say, whether it's on war and peace, or whether it's on the FBI and security, or whether it's whatever the subject, the spending continues. So today, we're not going to solve any of those problems, but hopefully we move in that direction. But we want to talk about an incident, and they've had some hearings recently that occurred shortly after Biden got into the presidency, and it has to do with the closing down of the war in Afghanistan, which is still not closed down and will not be for a long time. But Politico had an interesting article out. It says Republicans fixate on messy Afghanistan withdrawal. Oh, it's Trump's fault. But Trump was out of office. It's Trump's fault. The Republicans did it. But you know, in this short introduction on Politico, they have something in here that I will be talking about more in this program. He says there's no single causal factor that determine the outcome, which is partially true, but there are some single factors that I want to consider, and that is our overall foreign policy, because it has a lot to do with that. It is, to me, is a sad story what happened, because my solution would have prevented all this. We just should have stayed at home.
Yeah. Well, let's put on this first clip. This is from Politico, and it was yesterday was a hearing in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and the chairman of that committee, Michael McCall, probably a decent fellow, but very, very bad political views in our opinion, very extremely pro-war, but he basically wanted to make some political points. They want to tie this albatross on the back of Joe Biden, and there's no question that it was a very messy withdrawal. But McCall wants to relitigate it. But we have to remember that the U.S. invasion and occupation of Afghanistan spanned 4 presidential administrations. It started under Bush, and then Obama inherited it for 8 years, and then Trump had it for 4 years. Now, Trump did want to get out, and we know this from our friend Colonel Doug McGregor, who was working for the Secretary of Defense, those chaotic last few weeks of the Trump administration. He was tasked to try to get us out of Afghanistan and Syria, and he's told the story before. He wanted to get out, but in a way, Trump's situation was even worse than the others because his own administration wouldn't let him get out. They blocked him from getting out, and he didn't obviously try hard enough. But they're trying to make points now that this whole thing was going just fine. It's just that Biden messed up the departure. And let's put on the next clip because this is the setup for the hearing. The House Foreign Affairs Committee hammered the administration on Tuesday for its 2021 withdrawal, seeking to keep the chaotic exit in the public eye, even as the 2 retired generals who oversaw the evacuation offered few new details. That's a fair enough kind of swipe back at McCall, I think, on this. But he says, political rights, President Joe Biden's polls numbers tanked 3 years ago as U.S. forces left Afghanistan, especially after the ISIS suicide bomber killed 13 American service members. Republicans have since tried to make the withdrawal a political albatross to hang around Biden's neck, leading Democrats to defend him on the committee dais and beyond.
Yes, and hanging around his neck is sort of like saying all the problems of inflation right now, price inflation and the distortion of the market, it's all Biden's fault. Well, he's a participant and he aggravates it and makes it worse. All his friends have done that too. But it is very bipartisan. So foreign policy overall has been very bipartisan. Did you hear the Republican Party standing up against us participation in Afghanistan?
Yeah,
no, or the Middle East, or Ukraine, or in any one of these places. They went along with this because the money always gets spent. There's always an emergency like that.
Here we go. Appeals court reinstates hold on Texas immigration law. So I'll try to do it in a nutshell, Dr. Paul. So SB 4 was signed by Greg Abbott, our governor here in Texas, in December. It said that the Texas law enforcement officials can arrest and deport people who are here illegally. Well, a federal court took a hold of that and said, no, you can't do that. We're going to put a stop to that. And then an appeals court said, well, yeah, you can. And so Biden asked the Supreme Court, can you please deal with this in an emergency basis, get rid of the Supreme Court, or get rid of this ability for them to do it? Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to do it. So we're back at the part where they could do it, and then an appeals court said, actually, you can't do it. So I know that's like your head's turning back and forth like in a cartoon, but where we are right now is it's under appeal, the idea that the state of Texas can protect its own border.
And what they're arguing about is the supremacy clause. Texas says that they're invaders and the federal government's doing nothing. We have a right to protect our state. And they take it to court, and then there is this supremacy clause that I don't want to debate right now, but it to me sounds like it sort of needs to be further defined, because what if you had the supremacy clause and the states were protecting First Amendment rights, but the federal government wasn't? Does that mean we always have to go by the federal government laws? And that's why this problem occurs, because the original intent wasn't that we were going to have a united group of 18 states, 13 states coming together, but all of a sudden it was one country, and then we fought a civil war to prove that you didn't have the right to be independent, and we don't have a republic in that sense. But I think clarification there, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that could deal with it. Maybe we will hear about this, but I just think there are some things that if the our courts are corrupt, our whole system is corrupt. The Justice System Department doesn't even really exist. What do you say? Well, if you have a police problem, you go to the FBI, the CIA, they'll take care of us. So, well, that's the supremacy. They're federal. So there's something about federal that is very annoying, and I think something has been lost when we have lost confidence that our states can handle a lot of these problems.
Here's the funny part, and I underlined it. On Tuesday, Mexico's government declared that it would not accept the return of illegal immigrants from Texas to its territory under any circumstances. Deportations of individuals who are not Mexican citizens are not required to be accepted by Mexico. So even Mexico says, we don't want any illegal aliens, you can't come in. But the U.S. says, come on in.
But this is a narrow argument. They're just arguing about an illegal coming in, and we see them coming in, and it's very precise.
Yeah.
But what about if you go in about 500 miles another state and you have people breaking the law? You're illegal, we can't arrest you.
You know,
It's crazy.